In the early 17th century, before there was a country called the United States, there was only land. Vast land. Forests that seemed endless. Rivers that moved slowly through untouched wilderness. Native tribes had lived across this land for thousands of years, forming societies that were complex, organized, and deeply connected to nature. But across the Atlantic Ocean in Europe, nations were restless. England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands were competing for power. Wealth meant land. Land meant resources. And resources meant strength. So ships began to cross the ocean, carrying men and women who were searching for opportunity, escape, religious freedom, or simply survival. In 1607, a small group of English settlers arrived in a place they named Jamestown, in what is now Virginia. The journey had been long and uncertain. Many of the settlers were not farmers or laborers. They were gentlemen investors who believed riches would be easy to find. But the land did not welcome them gently. Disease spread quickly. Food was scarce. The winter was harsh. Many died within the first year. Slowly, painfully, Jamestown survived. Tobacco became the colony's lifeline. It grew well in the Virginia soil and became popular in Europe. Plantations expanded. Labor was needed. At first, indentured servants worked the fields. Later, enslaved Africans were forced into labor, creating a system that would shape American history in painful and lasting ways. Further north, in 1620, another group arrived. These settlers, often called the Pilgrims, landed at Plymouth. They were seeking religious freedom. Their first winter was devastating. Hunger and sickness took many lives. With the help of Native Americans, including the Wampanoag people, they learned how to plant corn and survive the seasons. A fragile peace existed for a time. Over the decades, more colonies formed along the eastern coastline. Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and others developed their own identities. Some were founded for trade, others for religion. Some became centers of shipbuilding and fishing. Others relied on farming and plantations. Life in the colonies was not dramatic every day. It was slow. It was repetitive. It was filled with work. Farmers rose with the sun. Blacksmiths hammered iron. Women maintained households and raised children. Town meetings were held. Churches gathered weekly. Communities were small, and survival required cooperation. Yet even in this quiet existence, tensions were forming. The colonies belonged to England. The king ruled from far away. For many years, the distance allowed a kind of freedom. Colonists made local decisions. They formed assemblies. They taxed themselves. They grew used to governing their own daily lives. Then wars in Europe changed everything. The French and Indian War, which began in 1754, was part of a larger global conflict between Britain and France. The fighting in North America was intense, but often slow and grinding. When the war ended in 1763, Britain had won vast territory. But victory came at a high cost. The British government was deeply in debt. To recover money, Parliament turned to the colonies. New taxes were introduced. The Stamp Act required printed materials to carry a paid stamp. The Townshend Acts taxed goods like tea and glass. To British officials, these were reasonable measures. To colonists, they felt unfair. The colonists had no representatives in Parliament. They had no voice in the decisions. The phrase taxation without representation began to spread quietly from town to town. Protests were not immediate explosions. They began as conversations in taverns, letters written between leaders, pamphlets printed and shared. Groups formed to resist imported British goods. Some protests turned tense. The Boston Massacre in 1770 left several colonists dead after British soldiers fired into a crowd. Then came tea. In 1773, colonists in Boston, frustrated by the Tea Act, boarded ships and dumped tea into the harbor. It was an act of defiance. Britain responded with punishment, closing Boston Harbor and tightening control. The colonies began to communicate more seriously with one another. The First Continental Congress met in 1774. Delegates discussed rights, grievances, and possible responses. Independence was not yet the goal for most. Many still hoped for reconciliation. But events moved slowly toward conflict. In April 1775, at Lexington and Concord, shots were fired. No one could later say clearly who fired first, but the American Revolutionary War had begun. The war itself was long and exhausting. It did not move quickly. It stretched over 8 years. Soldiers endured cold winters, especially at Valley Forge. Supplies were limited. Training was inconsistent. The Continental Army, led by George Washington, struggled but persisted. Support from France eventually strengthened the American cause. After years of battles, retreats, and endurance, British General Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown in 1781. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized American independence. The colonies were now states, but they were not yet a strong united nation. The Articles of Confederation created a loose system. The central government had limited power. It could not effectively tax or regulate trade. Economic problems followed. States argued. Farmers faced debt. In Massachusetts, Shays' rebellion revealed the weaknesses of the system. Leaders realized change was necessary. In 1787, delegates gathered in Philadelphia to revise the Articles. Instead, they created an entirely new constitution. It balanced power between branches of government. It created checks and balances. It established a federal system. The document was debated intensely. Federalists supported it. Anti-Federalists feared too much central power. To secure support, a Bill of Rights was promised. By 1789, the Constitution was in effect. George Washington became the first president. The new nation was small compared to what it would become. It stretched along the Atlantic coast. Beyond that lay territories controlled by native nations and European powers. America's beginning was not loud and constant. It was patient. It was uncertain. It was shaped by compromise and endurance more than by glory. And as the 18th century came to a close, the young republic faced a quiet question that would shape its future. How far would it grow? As the new republic settled into its fragile beginning, daily life did not suddenly become dramatic or grand. Most Americans were still farmers. They lived on scattered plots of land, rising before sunrise and ending their days when the light faded. Roads were rough and often muddy. News traveled slowly, carried by horseback or by small newspapers printed in modest towns. The government in the new capital worked carefully, aware that failure would mean collapse. President George Washington understood that every action would set a precedent. His cabinet included Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. Their visions for America were different. Hamilton believed in strong central authority. He supported a national bank and believed industry and commerce would strengthen the country. Jefferson preferred a nation of independent farmers with limited federal power and strong states. Their disagreements were not loud shouting matches at first. They were careful arguments written in letters and debated in quiet rooms. But these disagreements created the first political parties. Federalists aligned with Hamilton. Democratic Republicans followed Jefferson. The idea of political parties was not originally welcomed. Many feared factions would divide the nation. Yet division came slowly and naturally, shaped by different ideas about what America should become. In 1791, the Bill of Rights was ratified. 10 amendments were added to the Constitution, protecting freedoms such as speech, religion, and the press. These rights were written carefully, in simple language, but their meaning would echo across centuries. Meanwhile, beyond the Appalachian Mountains, the land waited. Western territories attracted settlers who wanted opportunity. The frontier was not peaceful. Native American tribes resisted expansion into their lands. Conflicts were frequent. Treaties were signed and broken. The tension between expansion and native sovereignty was steady and ongoing. In 1793, Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. This machine separated cotton fibers from seeds more efficiently than by hand. Cotton production increased dramatically in the South. Plantations expanded. The demand for enslaved labor grew. The invention strengthened the Southern economy but deepened the system of slavery. By the time Washington chose not to seek a third term, he had established a tradition of limited presidential power. In his farewell address, he warned against permanent foreign alliances and deep political division. John Adams became the second president. His term was marked by tension with France and the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts, which limited criticism of the government. Many Americans worried that these laws threatened the freedoms they had just secured. In 1800, a peaceful transfer of power occurred when Thomas Jefferson was elected president. It was called the Revolution of 1800, not because of violence, but because it demonstrated that political change could happen without bloodshed. Jefferson reduced government spending and sought to simplify the nation's structure. Then, in 1803, an opportunity arose that would quietly transform America's future. France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, controlled a vast territory west of the Mississippi River known as Louisiana. Jefferson feared French presence so close to American borders. Unexpectedly, France offered to sell the entire territory. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. It was a bold decision. Jefferson himself questioned whether the Constitution clearly allowed such a purchase, but the land was too vast and too important to ignore. Exploration followed. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark led an expedition across the new territory. They traveled rivers, mountains, and plains, mapping the land and documenting plants, animals, and native tribes. Their journey was long and physically demanding. It revealed both the beauty and the scale of the continent. Back east, life continued in steady rhythms. Towns grew slowly. Trade expanded. Roads improved little by little. But international tensions once again tested the young nation. In 1812, conflict with Britain erupted into war. Causes included trade restrictions and the impressment of American sailors into the British Navy. The War of 1812 was not a clear victory for either side. Washington, D.C. was burned by British forces, yet American resilience strengthened national identity. When the war ended in 1815, Americans felt a renewed sense of unity. The following years were sometimes called the era of good feelings. Political divisions softened temporarily. National pride grew. But beneath that calm surface, deeper questions were forming. As new states joined the Union, balance between free states and slave states became critical. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 allowed Missouri to enter as a slave state and Maine as a free state, maintaining balance in the Senate. It also drew a line across the Louisiana Territory to limit the expansion of slavery northward. The compromise delayed conflict. It did not remove it. In the 1820s and 1830s, Andrew Jackson rose to prominence. He presented himself as a champion of the common man. Property requirements for voting were reduced, expanding political participation among white men. Jackson's presidency brought both enthusiasm and controversy. He opposed the National Bank and succeeded in dismantling it. He also signed the Indian Removal Act, forcing many Native American tribes from their lands in the Southeast. The forced relocations led to immense suffering, including the Trail of Tears, where thousands died during the journey west. Expansion continued steadily. The idea of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined to spread across the continent, gained popularity. Settlers moved into Texas, Oregon, and California. In 1845, Texas was annexed into the United States. Tensions with Mexico increased, leading to the Mexican-American War. After victory in 1848, the United States gained vast territories in the Southwest and along the Pacific coast. Gold was discovered in California in 1848. Thousands rushed west in search of fortune. Towns appeared almost overnight. Most prospectors did not become wealthy, but the population's surge accelerated Western development. With each new territory, the question returned: would slavery expand westward? The Compromise of 1850 attempted again to maintain balance. California entered as a free state. A stricter Fugitive Slave Act required citizens to assist in returning escaped enslaved people. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery. Violence erupted in what became known as Bleeding Kansas. The nation was no longer able to contain its division quietly. A new political party formed, the Republican Party, opposing the expansion of slavery into new territories. By the late 1850s, speeches grew sharper, trust grew weaker. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. He did not call for immediate abolition of slavery where it already existed, but Southern states feared its eventual end. One by one, states seceded from the Union. The long tension that had built slowly over decades finally broke. The Civil War began in 1861. The Civil War did not begin with sudden chaos everywhere at once. It began with a slow tightening of certainty. After the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, Southern leaders gathered in state conventions. Speeches were made in careful tones. Documents were written. Ordinances of secession were passed one by one. South Carolina left first. Others followed. By early 1861, 11 states had declared that they were no longer part of the United States. They formed the Confederate States of America and elected Jefferson Davis as their president. In the North, there was disbelief at first. Many hoped the crisis would pass. Some believed compromise might still be possible. But in April 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. The bombardment lasted for hours. When the fort surrendered, it marked the official beginning of war. Young men volunteered quickly on both sides. Many believed the conflict would be short. They imagined one decisive battle, then a return home. Instead, the war would stretch for 4 long years. The Union had advantages in industry, railroads, and population. The Confederacy had strong military leadership and the determination to defend its homeland. Geography shaped the struggle. Rivers, forests, hills, and farmland became battlefields. Early battles such as Bull Run surprised the North. The fighting was fierce and confusing. Soldiers realized quickly that this would not be a brief conflict. Life for soldiers was often slow and exhausting between battles. Camps were crowded. Disease spread easily. Food could be scarce. Letters from home became precious comfort. Soldiers marched for miles under heavy packs. They waited. They endured heat in summer and cold in winter. In 1862, battles intensified. At Antietam, one of the bloodiest single days in American history unfolded. Thousands were killed or wounded in hours. The scale of loss shocked the nation. After Antietam, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that enslaved people in Confederate-held territory were free. The proclamation did not immediately free all enslaved individuals, but it changed the meaning of the war. The Union now fought not only to preserve itself, but also to end slavery. The war expanded westward and southward. At Gettysburg in 1863, Union and Confederate forces clashed over 3 days in Pennsylvania. The fighting was intense. When it ended, the Union held the field. It marked a turning point. Later that year, Lincoln delivered a short speech at the dedication of a cemetery there. In a few measured sentences, he spoke of a new birth of freedom and the idea that government of the people, by the people, for the people should not perish. In the West, General Ulysses S. Grant gained victories along the Mississippi River. When Vicksburg fell in 1863, the Union gained control of the river, dividing the Confederacy. The Confederacy faced growing shortages. Blockades limited trade. Railroads deteriorated. Inflation made basic goods expensive. Civilians felt the strain deeply. In 1864, General William Tecumseh Sherman led a march through Georgia. His strategy targeted not only armies, but also infrastructure, weakening the South's ability to continue fighting. By 1865, Confederate forces were exhausted. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The meeting was respectful and formal. The war was effectively over. The nation, however, was deeply wounded. Just days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. The shock was heavy. Lincoln had led the nation through its darkest crisis. His death created uncertainty about the future. The period that followed was known as Reconstruction. The central question was how to rebuild the South and how to define freedom for formerly enslaved people. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th granted citizenship and equal protection under the law. The 15th protected voting rights for Black men. For a brief period, there was hope for meaningful change. Black Americans participated in government. Schools were built. Communities formed new institutions. But resistance grew. White supremacist groups formed. Violence and intimidation attempted to reverse progress. Political compromise in 1877 effectively ended Reconstruction, and federal troops withdrew from the South. In the decades that followed, segregation laws known as Jim Crow spread across southern states. Rights promised during Reconstruction were gradually restricted. The Civil War had preserved the Union and ended slavery, but it did not resolve every question about equality and justice. Those questions would continue quietly, steadily, through the next century. As the 19th century moved forward, the United States began to change in another way. Industry was rising. Railroads stretched farther west. Steel mills expanded. Cities grew. Immigrants arrived from Europe in large numbers, seeking opportunity. The quiet rural republic of the early colonies was becoming something larger and more complex. After the Civil War ended and Reconstruction slowly faded, the United States entered a period of deep and steady transformation. The guns had grown silent, but the work of rebuilding and redefining the nation continued in quieter ways. Across the South, farms struggled to recover. Rail lines had been destroyed. Towns had been burned. The economy shifted toward sharecropping, where landowners allowed farmers to work small plots in exchange for a portion of the crops. For many formerly enslaved families, this system brought limited independence, but also long cycles of debt. In the North and Midwest, industry expanded at a pace never seen before in America. Railroads stitched the continent together. Steel production increased. Coal mines operated day and night. Factories rose along rivers and near growing cities. In 1869, the first transcontinental railroad was completed at Promontory Summit in Utah Territory. When the final spike was driven into place, it symbolized more than transportation. It symbolized connection. Travel from coast to coast, once a journey of months, could now take days. Railroads encouraged settlement. Towns appeared along tracks. Businesses followed. Farmers could ship crops to distant markets. Goods from factories could reach rural communities. But industrial growth did not bring comfort for everyone. Factory work was repetitive and exhausting. Shifts were long. Conditions were often unsafe. Child labor was common. Workers began to organize into labor unions, demanding shorter hours and safer workplaces. Strikes occurred in rail yards and factories. Some turned violent. Others ended quietly with few changes. Immigrants arrived steadily from Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Eastern Europe. They entered crowded cities such as New York and Chicago. Many found work in factories or construction. They lived in tenements where space was limited and sanitation was poor. Yet for many, life still offered more opportunity than what they had left behind. Meanwhile, the frontier continued to move westward. The Homestead Act encouraged families to settle on Western land. Plains once occupied by Native American tribes were claimed by settlers. Conflicts increased. The U.S. Army engaged in battles with tribes defending their land. Treaties were signed and broken repeatedly. By the 1890s, the frontier was declared closed. The continuous line of unsettled land had disappeared. The nation stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. As the country grew larger, its influence began to reach beyond its borders. In 1898, tensions with Spain led to the Spanish-American War. The conflict was brief. After victory, the United States gained territories including Puerto Rico and Guam. It also became involved in the Philippines. The war marked a turning point as the United States stepped onto the global stage. At home, reform movements gathered strength. The progressive era began in the early 20th century. Journalists known as muckrakers exposed corruption in business and government. Activists pushed for child labor laws, food safety regulations, and voting reforms. Women organized for suffrage. After decades of effort, the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, granting women the right to vote. Cities grew taller as skyscrapers rose into the skyline. Electricity illuminated streets. Telephones connected homes and businesses. Automobiles began to replace horse-drawn carriages. Yet prosperity was uneven. In the 1920s, economic growth seemed strong. Stock markets rose. Consumer goods became more common, but speculation and unregulated banking created hidden instability. In 1929, the stock market crashed. Banks failed. Businesses closed. Unemployment rose sharply. The Great Depression settled over the nation. Daily life slowed again, but not peacefully. Families struggled to find work. Breadlines formed. Farms in the Midwest faced drought and dust storms during what became known as the Dust Bowl. Many migrated west in search of opportunity. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt became president. He introduced the New Deal, a series of programs designed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. Public works projects built roads, bridges, and dams. Social Security was established to support the elderly. The Depression did not end quickly. It lingered through much of the decade. Then global conflict, once again, changed America's direction. In 1939, war began in Europe. At first, the United States remained officially neutral, but events overseas gradually pulled the nation closer to involvement. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The next day, the United States declared war. Factories shifted to wartime production. Men enlisted or were drafted. Women entered industrial jobs in large numbers. The war effort united much of the country. Rationing limited consumer goods. Communities planted victory gardens. Bonds were sold to support military spending. American forces fought in Europe and the Pacific. After years of intense conflict, the war ended in 1945. When soldiers returned home, the United States found itself in a new position. Much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. American industry remained strong. The country emerged as a global superpower. But peace did not bring complete calm. Tension with the Soviet Union led to the Cold War. It was not a direct battlefield war between the two nations, but a prolonged period of rivalry. Nuclear weapons created fear of destruction on a massive scale. Military alliances formed. Conflicts occurred indirectly in places such as Korea and later Vietnam. At home, prosperity grew during the 1950s. Suburbs expanded. Highways connected cities. Television became common in households, yet social tensions persisted. The civil rights movement gained momentum. African Americans challenged segregation and discrimination. Leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. advocated nonviolent protest. Laws were passed in the 1960s to protect voting rights and prohibit segregation. The nation continued to change steadily, sometimes calmly, sometimes through protest and conflict. By the late 20th century, technology reshaped daily life once again. Computers entered workplaces. The internet connected people across long distances. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Through each era, the United States evolved not in constant bursts of drama, but through long stretches of gradual adjustment. The early colonies had been small and uncertain. The Republic had nearly divided itself. Industry had transformed farms into cities. Wars had drawn the nation into global leadership. And yet for ordinary people, life often remained steady. Work, family, community, quiet routines repeated day after day. As the 20th century moved forward, the United States stood in a position it had never occupied before. It was no longer a fragile republic uncertain of its survival. It was no longer simply expanding across a continent. It had become an industrial giant, a financial center, and after the Second World War, one of the two most powerful nations in the world. Yet this transformation did not feel dramatic in every home. For many Americans, life still followed a steady rhythm. Parents worked. Children attended school. Churches filled on Sundays. Small businesses opened their doors each morning. Beneath these routines, however, the structure of the nation was shifting quietly and permanently. After 1945, Europe and much of Asia were devastated. Cities had been reduced to rubble. Economies were shattered. The United States, by contrast, had avoided destruction on its own soil. Its factories had expanded during wartime production. Its workforce had grown skilled and efficient. Its agricultural output was strong. American leaders understood that rebuilding Europe was not only an act of assistance, but also a strategy. In 1948, the Marshall Plan was introduced. Billions of dollars were sent to Western European nations to support reconstruction. The goal was stability. A stable Europe would resist the spread of communism and remain economically connected to the United States. At the same time, tensions with the Soviet Union deepened. The alliance formed during the war dissolved into suspicion. Each side feared the expansion of the other's ideology. This period became known as the Cold War. Unlike earlier wars, the Cold War did not center on one battlefield. It was global and indirect. It included political pressure, economic competition, intelligence operations, and the constant development of nuclear weapons. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was formed. It was a military alliance between the United States, Canada, and several Western European countries. The agreement stated that an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. That same year, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb. The balance of power shifted. The possibility of nuclear war became a quiet fear in everyday life. Schools conducted drills where children practiced hiding under desks. Families built small shelters in basements. The fear was present, but it was often unspoken. In 1950, war broke out in Korea. North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. The United States, under the banner of the United Nations, intervened. The conflict lasted 3 years. It ended not with a clear victory, but with an armistice that divided the Korean peninsula near the 38th parallel. The Cold War continued. During the 1950s, American society experienced economic expansion. Suburbs grew around major cities. Highways connected regions. The automobile became central to daily life. Companies such as Ford and General Motors produced vehicles in large numbers. Shopping centers appeared. Television became a common feature in living rooms. The culture emphasized stability and family life. Yet beneath that surface, important social questions remained unresolved. In the South, segregation laws enforced separation between white and black citizens. Public facilities were divided. Voting restrictions limited political participation. The Supreme Court addressed segregation in 1954 in Brown v. Board of Education. The court ruled that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. Change did not happen immediately. Resistance was strong in many areas, but the decision marked the beginning of a broader movement. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her quiet act of defiance led to a bus boycott that lasted over a year. A young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a leader. The civil rights movement expanded through peaceful protests, marches, and legal challenges. Demonstrators faced hostility, arrest, and violence, yet they persisted. In 1963, a large march took place in Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a speech in which he spoke of a dream rooted in equality. The words were measured and hopeful. They became part of the nation's memory. Legislation followed. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination in public accommodations and employment. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 sought to protect voting access. While social change moved forward, foreign policy grew more complicated. In Southeast Asia, Vietnam became a point of conflict. After French colonial rule ended, the country was divided into North and South. The United States feared that if South Vietnam fell to communism, other nations in the region would follow. American involvement increased gradually during the early 1960s. By the mid-1960s, large numbers of American troops were deployed. The war was difficult. The terrain was challenging. The enemy used guerrilla tactics. At home, support for the war declined as casualties rose. Protests occurred on college campuses and in major cities. The nation experienced a period of division. In 1969, American astronauts landed on the moon. The achievement was part of the space race with the Soviet Union. It represented technological skill and national pride. For a moment, many Americans felt united by the accomplishment. The Vietnam War ended for the United States in 1973, though fighting in the region continued until 1975. The conflict left lasting effects on veterans and on public trust in government. The 1970s brought economic challenges. Inflation increased. Oil shortages caused long lines at gas stations. Political scandal also shook the nation. The Watergate investigation led to the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974. Despite uncertainty, the structure of daily life continued. Families adapted. Businesses adjusted. New technologies developed. In the 1980s, the Cold War entered its final phase. Military spending increased. Rhetoric between the United States and the Soviet Union grew firm. Yet behind the scenes, diplomatic conversations continued. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. It had divided East and West Berlin for decades. Its fall symbolized the weakening of Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. The Cold War ended without a direct war between the two superpowers. The United States remained as the world's leading power. As the 20th century closed, globalization expanded. Trade agreements connected economies. The internet began linking individuals across continents. Information moved instantly. The United States entered the 21st century as a nation shaped by industry, conflict, reform, and innovation. It had experienced internal division and external rivalry. It had grown from coastal settlements into a global influence. Yet for many citizens, the experience of these decades was not constant drama. It was gradual change layered onto familiar routines. Cold War tension, modern shifts, and the quiet shape of a changing nation. When the Cold War ended in 1991, the United States found itself in an unfamiliar position. For nearly half a century, its identity had been shaped by rivalry with the Soviet Union. Policies, alliances, military budgets, and even school lessons had been framed by that tension. Now the long competition was over. There was no sudden celebration that lasted forever. Instead, there was a slow adjustment. Leaders spoke about a new world order. Analysts debated what role the United States should play without a clear rival. During the early 1990s, attention shifted toward economic growth and globalization. Trade agreements expanded. In 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement linked the economies of the United States, Canada, and Mexico more closely. Supporters argued that open trade would increase prosperity. Critics worried about lost manufacturing jobs. At the same time, technology was quietly transforming everyday life. Personal computers became more common in homes. The internet, once limited to universities and research institutions, expanded into public use. Email replaced letters for many forms of communication. Businesses created websites. Information that once required visits to libraries could now be accessed through screens. This transformation did not happen in a single moment. It unfolded gradually, year by year. Dial-up connections were slow. Websites were simple, but the direction was clear. The economy began shifting from heavy manufacturing toward information and services. The 1990s were also marked by relative economic growth. Unemployment decreased. Stock markets rose. New companies formed around digital technology. The sense of opportunity felt steady, though not universal. Then, on September 11, 2001, the rhythm changed abruptly. Terrorist attacks targeted the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon near Washington, D.C. The destruction was visible and immediate. Thousands lost their lives. The event reshaped national priorities. In the days that followed, Americans gathered quietly in communities, churches, and public spaces. Flags appeared on homes and buildings. There was a sense of shared shock and uncertainty. The government responded by launching what became known as the War on Terror. Military operations began in Afghanistan, where leaders believed the attacks had been planned. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq, citing concerns about weapons of mass destruction and regional stability. The conflicts were complex and prolonged. Troops served multiple tours. Families waited for news from distant deserts and mountains. Debates about foreign policy grew intense at home. While wars unfolded overseas, daily life continued in ordinary patterns for many citizens. Children attended school. Offices opened each morning. New technologies entered households. The mid-2000s brought another challenge. In 2008, financial institutions began to fail. The housing market, which had expanded rapidly through loans and speculation, collapsed. Major banks faced bankruptcy. Stock markets dropped sharply. The Great Recession followed. Unemployment rose. Businesses closed. Families struggled with mortgages and savings losses. The federal government introduced emergency measures to stabilize the economy. Recovery came slowly. Over several years, employment numbers improved. New industries continued to develop, especially in technology and digital services. Social changes also accelerated during this period. Conversations about equality broadened beyond earlier civil rights struggles. Movements addressed gender equality, LGBTQ rights, immigration policy, and criminal justice reform. Public discussion often unfolded through social media platforms, where ideas spread quickly. In 2008, Barack Obama was elected president. His election marked a significant moment as the first African American to hold the office. For many, it symbolized progress. For others, it intensified political division. Political polarization increased during the early 21st century. News sources multiplied. Online platforms allowed individuals to choose information that aligned with their views. Dialogue sometimes became less patient and more immediate. Meanwhile, technological development continued without pause. Smartphones combined communication, photography, navigation, and entertainment into a single device carried in a pocket. Social media platforms connected friends and strangers across continents. Streaming services changed how entertainment was consumed. Workplaces adapted. Remote communication became possible. Global teams collaborated across time zones. The boundaries between local and international blurred further. In 2020, a global pandemic introduced another period of uncertainty. Businesses closed temporarily. Schools shifted to online instruction. Travel slowed dramatically. Healthcare systems faced strain. Communities adjusted in quiet ways. Families spent more time at home. Video calls replaced gatherings. Masks became common in public spaces. The experience was shared across states and across nations. Gradually, vaccination programs and public health measures allowed many activities to resume. The economy reopened in stages. Some changes, such as remote work options, remained more permanent. Throughout these decades, the United States continued to balance its role abroad with challenges at home. It maintained alliances formed during the Cold War while adapting to new global powers rising in Asia and elsewhere. Climate concerns also grew more central. Discussions about renewable energy, environmental regulation, and sustainable development expanded. Severe weather events prompted reflection on infrastructure and planning. Despite these shifts, certain elements remained steady. Local communities still held school events and sports games. Small businesses opened and closed. Families celebrated holidays. The large movements of politics and economics moved above the everyday routines of millions of citizens. The nation that began as scattered colonies had become deeply interconnected. Its influence reached across continents. Its culture, technology, and economy shaped global patterns. Yet its history remained marked by gradual change more often than sudden transformation. Each generation inherited institutions built by the previous one and adjusted them slightly, sometimes through reform, sometimes through conflict, often through quiet negotiation. As the second decade of the 21st century continued, the United States moved forward in ways that felt both rapid and gradual at the same time. Technology advanced quickly. News traveled instantly. Opinions formed and spread within minutes. Yet beneath the surface of constant updates, the deeper structures of the nation continued to evolve slowly, shaped by long patterns rather than single moments. After the pandemic years began to ease, attention shifted toward rebuilding and adjustment. Schools reopened fully. Businesses redefined office space. Some workers returned to traditional workplaces, while others continued remote schedules. The idea of where and how Americans worked became more flexible than it had been in generations. The economy experienced uneven recovery. Some industries expanded rapidly, especially in technology, logistics, and renewable energy. Others faced labor shortages or supply chain disruptions. Conversations about inflation and cost of living became common at dinner tables and in policy discussions. Housing prices rose in many regions. Younger Americans faced challenges entering homeownership. At the same time, migration patterns shifted. Some families left dense urban centers for smaller cities or suburban areas. Others returned to cities as cultural life revived. Political life remained deeply divided. Elections were closely contested. Public trust in institutions fluctuated. Debates about voting laws, federal authority, and the balance of state power continued. The Constitution, written in the 18th century, remained the framework through which modern conflicts were interpreted. Social movements continued to influence national conversation. Protests addressed policing, racial justice, and equality. Court decisions shaped discussions about rights and responsibilities. The Supreme Court remained central in interpreting constitutional questions. Meanwhile, technological change moved quietly into nearly every aspect of life. Artificial intelligence systems began assisting in healthcare diagnostics, business planning, and transportation logistics. Electric vehicles became more common on highways. Renewable energy projects expanded across plains and coastal areas. Wind turbines and solar farms dotted landscapes that had once been devoted entirely to agriculture. Universities and research institutions collaborated with private companies to develop new medical treatments. Advances in biotechnology offered possibilities for treating diseases once considered incurable. Space exploration also returned to public attention as government agencies and private companies launched new missions. Yet for many Americans, daily life still revolved around familiar patterns. Children boarded school buses in the morning. Parents commuted or logged into virtual meetings. Grocery stores stocked shelves. Local sports teams played weekend games. The strength of the United States continued to rest not only in its global influence, but also in its local communities. Small towns held festivals. Libraries hosted reading groups. Volunteer organizations supported neighbors in need. Internationally, the country navigated a complex environment. Relations with long-standing allies required maintenance. Emerging powers demanded new diplomatic strategies. Trade relationships were renegotiated. Military commitments were reassessed. Climate policy gained increasing urgency. Wildfires, hurricanes, and heat waves prompted discussions about infrastructure resilience. Investments were directed toward energy transition and environmental research. The conversation was not always unified, but it remained present. The media landscape continued to fragment. Traditional newspapers adapted to digital subscriptions. Independent creators built audiences online. Information was abundant, but attention was limited. The challenge shifted from access to evaluation. Education also evolved. Online learning platforms expanded opportunities for students in remote areas. Universities experimented with hybrid instruction models. Skills in technology, data analysis, and global communication became increasingly valuable. Cultural life reflected diversity. Music, film, literature, and digital art drew from many traditions. Immigration, long a defining feature of American history, continued to shape neighborhoods and industries. New citizens added to the ongoing story of the nation. The military presence overseas adjusted as well. Some long-term deployments concluded. New strategic priorities focused on cybersecurity and technological competition rather than only physical territory. Throughout these developments, the American system of checks and balances persisted. Legislative debates moved slowly through committees. Executive orders influenced policy direction. Judicial rulings clarified or reshaped interpretation. The pace could feel frustrating to some, steady to others. Generational change played its part. Younger Americans grew up in a digital world where information was immediate and global. Older generations adapted to technologies that did not exist in their childhood. Conversations between generations sometimes revealed differences in expectation and perspective. Economic inequality remained a subject of concern. While innovation created wealth, its distribution was uneven. Discussions about taxation, healthcare access, and education funding continued across election cycles. Yet history suggested that the United States had always evolved through a mixture of tension and adaptation. From colonial settlements to industrial expansion, from civil war to civil rights, from world wars to digital networks, each era brought uncertainty followed by adjustment. The present moment was no exception. The nation stood neither at a final destination nor at a complete beginning. It remained a work in progress, shaped by millions of individual decisions made each day. Teachers preparing lessons, engineers designing systems, farmers tending fields, lawmakers drafting bills. In quiet ways, the future was being written not only in national capitals, but also in small classrooms and local workshops. The American experiment, begun in the 18th century with handwritten documents and uncertain hopes, continued into the 21st century with satellites in orbit and data flowing invisibly through fiber optic cables. It remained imperfect, it remained debated, but it endured. And like the long history that preceded it, the present unfolded slowly, through ordinary mornings and routine evenings, through conversations around kitchen tables and discussions in public halls. Continued. Even as modern America moves through rapid headlines and constant updates, much of its transformation happens gradually, almost quietly, in ways that only become clear over time. In the years following the early 2020s, infrastructure became a major focus of national discussion. Roads, bridges, ports, and internet access systems required updating. Investments were directed toward repairing physical structures that had aged over decades. High-speed internet expanded into rural regions, connecting communities that once had limited digital access. This connection allowed small businesses to reach national markets and students to access broader educational tools. Energy systems also shifted slowly. Traditional oil and gas production continued, but renewable energy sources gained a stronger foothold. Solar panels appeared on rooftops in suburban neighborhoods. Wind turbines rotated steadily across open plains. Battery storage technology improved, allowing more consistent use of renewable power. The automotive industry adjusted to consumer demand for electric vehicles. Charging stations became more common along highways and in city parking areas. Manufacturers redesigned factories to produce vehicles powered by electricity rather than gasoline. These changes did not happen overnight. They unfolded through careful planning, investment, and adaptation by workers and companies alike. Healthcare remained an important concern. Advances in telemedicine allowed patients to consult doctors remotely. Research institutions focused on vaccine development, genetic treatments, and data-driven diagnostics. Insurance systems and costs remained topics of debate, reflecting the ongoing challenge of balancing innovation with accessibility. Education continued evolving. Students grew familiar with blended classrooms that combined in-person instruction with digital tools. Coding and data literacy became part of many curricula. Universities partnered with technology firms to prepare students for emerging industries. At the same time, traditional crafts and trades retained importance. Construction workers, electricians, mechanics, and agricultural workers sustained the physical foundation of the country. Even in an age of automation, hands-on labor remained essential. Internationally, the United States navigated complex relationships. Economic partnerships required negotiation. Military alliances required reassurance. Diplomacy required patience. The world had become more interconnected, and decisions made in one region often influenced markets and politics elsewhere. Space exploration returned gradually to public interest. Private companies launched reusable rockets. Government agencies planned new missions to the moon and beyond. These efforts were presented not only as competition, but also as collaboration, involving international partners. Cultural expression reflected the blending of tradition and innovation. Film and television shifted from broadcast schedules to streaming platforms. Music spread globally within hours of release. Writers and artists published independently online, reaching audiences without traditional gatekeepers. Demographic shifts influenced political and economic planning. Urban centers diversified further. Rural communities adapted to changing agricultural markets. Immigration continued to shape workforce patterns, contributing to industries ranging from healthcare to technology. The Supreme Court remained central in interpreting constitutional questions that earlier generations could not have imagined. Issues involving digital privacy, data ownership, and freedom of expression in online spaces required applying 18th-century language to 21st-century realities. Elections remained regular and structured. Campaigns used digital outreach tools alongside traditional rallies. Voters debated policy choices in living rooms and through social media conversations. The process could be contentious, yet it reflected a long-standing practice of peaceful political transition. Environmental challenges persisted. Wildfires in western states, hurricanes along the Gulf Coast, and flooding in river regions prompted infrastructure upgrades and emergency planning. Federal and state agencies coordinated responses, while communities organized local relief efforts. Amid these broad trends, individual lives followed personal paths. Students chose careers. Entrepreneurs opened restaurants or technology startups. Families moved for work or education. Retirees relocated to warmer climates or smaller towns. History often appears dramatic when viewed from a distance. Yet for those living within it, change feels incremental. One year blends into the next. Policies adjust slightly. Technologies improve gradually. Generations replace one another without ceremony. The United States in the present era carries layers of its past. Colonial town halls evolved into modern city councils. Early trade routes became interstate highways. Telegraph lines became fiber optic cables. The themes of expansion, conflict, reform, and innovation repeat in new forms. The nation continues to face questions that have echoed for centuries. How much power should the federal government hold? How should rights be balanced with security? How can opportunity be expanded without limiting freedom? These questions do not disappear. They are revisited in each era. Economic cycles continue as well. Periods of growth alternate with slowdown. Markets adjust. Entrepreneurs experiment. Workers retrain. The ability to adapt remains one of the country's enduring characteristics. In quieter corners of the nation, local traditions remain steady. County fairs open each summer. High school graduations mark transitions into adulthood. Public libraries provide access to knowledge regardless of income. These ordinary institutions give stability even as national debates unfold. Technology will likely continue reshaping communication and employment. Artificial intelligence may alter industries from transportation to legal research. Renewable energy may expand further. Medical breakthroughs may extend life expectancy. Yet the pace will likely feel both swift and gradual, depending on perspective. From the fragile colonies of the 17th century to the interconnected digital society of today, the American story has unfolded not as a single dramatic rise, but as a long sequence of adjustments. The quiet persistence of communities, the steady work of institutions, and the repeated effort to redefine ideals have carried the nation forward. And so the present moment becomes part of a longer arc. Not an ending, not a final chapter, but another stretch of time in which the country continues to shape itself through debate, invention, cooperation, and sometimes disagreement. The story remains ongoing, written daily in ordinary actions. If you would like, I can now expand one modern theme into a deeper, longer, sleepy narration, or begin a completely new American history series in the same calm style. As the years continue to unfold, the United States moves forward in ways that are both visible and subtle. Large events draw headlines, but much of the nation's character is shaped in slower patterns that stretch across decades. One of the most steady influences in modern America is demographic change. The population continues to grow, though at a slower rate than in earlier centuries. Cities that once expanded rapidly now adjust to new realities. Some regions gain residents as industries expand, while others experience decline as manufacturing shifts or automation reduces labor needs. This movement within the country is not new. Americans have always relocated in search of opportunity. In the 19th century, families traveled west in wagons. In the 20th century, many moved from farms to cities. In the present era, relocation may involve crossing state lines for employment in technology, healthcare, or energy sectors. Education remains central to opportunity. Public schools, community colleges, and universities continue adapting to workforce demands. Online courses allow adults to retrain for new careers. Lifelong learning becomes less of a slogan and more of a necessity in a world where industries evolve quickly. The agricultural sector, often overlooked in discussions of innovation, quietly adopts advanced technologies. Farmers use satellite data to monitor crop health. Automated machinery increases efficiency. Water conservation techniques become more precise. Despite urban growth, the rural landscape remains a vital part of the national economy. In financial markets, digital transactions replace paper systems almost entirely. Consumers pay bills through mobile devices. Businesses operate with global supply chains coordinated by software. Yet economic cycles still follow familiar patterns of expansion and contraction. Community identity continues to matter deeply. Local governments manage schools, utilities, and zoning decisions. State governments experiment with policies that reflect regional values. The balance between state authority and federal oversight, debated since the founding era, remains active. Cultural life reflects the nation's diversity. Holidays from many traditions are celebrated openly. Food from around the world becomes part of everyday dining. Music blends genres across generations. Sports events draw national attention, providing shared moments of celebration. The legal system continues interpreting long-standing constitutional language in new contexts. Questions about digital privacy, online speech, and data ownership require careful consideration. Courts examine how fundamental rights apply in a connected world. Environmental stewardship becomes more central in policy discussions. Investments in clean water systems, flood prevention, and wildfire management demonstrate recognition of long-term challenges. Scientific research informs planning, though political disagreement sometimes shapes implementation. Energy independence and sustainability remain intertwined goals. Oil production continues in some regions, while renewable capacity expands in others. The transition is gradual rather than immediate, involving economic trade-offs and workforce retraining. The role of the United States on the global stage also evolves. Military presence adapts to new forms of conflict, including cybersecurity threats. Diplomacy addresses trade, climate agreements, and humanitarian crises. Alliances are maintained, adjusted, or strengthened depending on strategic needs. In everyday life, technology becomes nearly invisible because it is constant. Navigation systems guide drivers without paper maps. Streaming platforms replace traditional broadcast schedules. Smart devices regulate household temperatures and security systems. Convenience increases, but so do questions about privacy and digital dependency. Generational shifts bring new priorities. Younger Americans often emphasize environmental awareness and social inclusion. Older generations offer historical memory and institutional continuity. Dialogue between age groups shapes policy and culture. Economic inequality remains an ongoing concern. Discussions about taxation, healthcare, and housing affordability continue through election cycles. Solutions are proposed, revised, and debated in legislative chambers and public forums. Despite division at times, the nation's constitutional framework remains intact. Elections occur on schedule. Courts review disputes. Peaceful transitions of power continue. These routines, repeated for more than 2 centuries, provide continuity even during periods of tension. Innovation persists quietly in laboratories and startups. Breakthroughs in renewable energy storage, medical imaging, and communication infrastructure develop incrementally. Many advances take years of research before reaching public awareness. At the same time, tradition holds its place. Historical landmarks are preserved. National parks protect landscapes that have remained largely unchanged for generations. Schools teach foundational documents written in careful 18th century script. From coastal cities to mountain towns, from desert communities to northern forests, the geography of the country remains vast and varied. Regional cultures maintain distinct accents, foods, and customs while sharing common national institutions. The American story continues as a blend of continuity and adaptation. It does not move in a straight line. It turns, adjusts, and corrects itself through debate and compromise. The quiet strength of the nation lies not only in dramatic achievements, but in the steady operation of its systems. Postal routes deliver mail. Courts hear cases. Teachers prepare lessons. Engineers maintain bridges. Farmers harvest crops. These daily acts sustain the broader structure. History, when viewed from afar, highlights wars and elections. Yet daily life often defines the deeper character of a society. As the present era unfolds, the United States remains a nation still shaping itself. Its past informs its decisions. Its institutions evolve gradually. Its citizens participate in countless small ways. The long arc from colonial settlements to digital networks continues, not with sudden endings, but with steady movement forward. If you would like even more continuation, I can deepen this into a long, reflective closing chapter about America's future direction in a calm, sleepy tone. As time moves forward, the future of the United States remains connected to the patterns of its past. Change arrives, but it rarely erases what came before. Instead, it builds on it, adjusts it, and sometimes corrects it. One important factor shaping the future is technological acceleration. New tools appear faster than in earlier centuries. Artificial intelligence systems assist in research, customer service, design, and data analysis. Automation reduces repetitive tasks in factories and offices. These developments increase productivity, but also require workers to adapt their skills. Job training programs expand to meet this demand. Community colleges partner with local industries to prepare employees for emerging roles. Employers invest in continuous learning because skills that were useful a decade ago may need updating. Digital infrastructure becomes as important as physical infrastructure. Data centers operate around the clock to store and process information. Cybersecurity teams work to protect government agencies, businesses, and individuals from digital threats. Security in the digital age becomes a national priority, similar to protecting borders or trade routes in earlier eras. Transportation systems continue evolving. Autonomous driving technology is tested and refined. Public transit systems integrate digital payment methods and real-time tracking. Airports adopt advanced screening technology to manage growing travel demands. These improvements aim to increase efficiency and safety. Healthcare systems integrate predictive analytics to identify health risks earlier. Wearable devices track heart rate, sleep patterns, and physical activity. Medical professionals analyze large amounts of data to improve treatment strategies. Research into personalized medicine advances slowly but steadily. The population continues to diversify. Immigration contributes to workforce growth and cultural exchange. New generations born in the country grow up in an environment shaped by global connections. Language learning, international trade, and cross-cultural communication become routine aspects of education and business. Urban development reflects changing priorities. Cities invest in public transportation, green spaces, and mixed-use neighborhoods. Developers focus on sustainable building materials and energy-efficient designs. Planning emphasizes long-term resilience against climate impacts and population growth. Rural communities also adapt. Broadband expansion enables remote work and online entrepreneurship. Agricultural technology reduces labor intensity while improving yield efficiency. Local businesses use digital marketing to reach broader audiences beyond geographic limits. Political engagement remains active. Citizens participate in elections, town halls, and public forums. Advocacy groups organize campaigns around specific issues. Social media platforms provide channels for rapid mobilization and discussion, though they also amplify disagreement at times. The legal system continues to interpret rights within new contexts. Questions about artificial intelligence accountability, digital content regulation, and biotechnology ethics require careful legal review. Courts examine how constitutional principles apply to emerging technologies that did not exist when the founding documents were written. International relations shift with global economic changes. Trade partnerships evolve as supply chains diversify. Economic competition increases among major powers. Diplomacy remains essential to managing trade disputes, environmental agreements, and security concerns. Defense strategy focuses not only on traditional military strength, but also on cyber defense and technological advantage. Investment in research and development supports innovation in communications, space exploration, and advanced manufacturing. Space exploration expands with renewed ambition. Missions aim to return humans to the moon and prepare for potential exploration of Mars. Scientific research conducted in space contributes to understanding climate systems, materials science, and biology. Private and public collaboration defines modern space programs. Cultural expression continues to reflect both local identity and global influence. Streaming platforms allow creators to reach international audiences instantly. Independent filmmakers, musicians, and writers distribute work directly to supporters. Creativity flourishes in digital spaces alongside traditional institutions. Education systems integrate global awareness into curricula. Students study international economics, environmental science, and digital literacy. Critical thinking becomes essential in evaluating information sources in an era of abundant online content. Despite rapid transformation, certain foundational elements remain steady. The Constitution still guides governance. Elections remain the mechanism for leadership selection. Courts interpret laws through established procedures. These institutions provide continuity through change. Communities remain central to national life. Volunteer organizations support disaster relief efforts. Religious institutions, civic groups, and nonprofit organizations contribute to social stability. Local engagement strengthens social bonds even as national conversations dominate media attention. Economic growth continues through innovation and entrepreneurship. Small businesses launch with digital tools that reduce startup costs. Venture capital supports technology development. Large corporations invest in research to remain competitive globally. Challenges persist as well. Debates over income inequality, healthcare access, education funding, and environmental responsibility continue across political cycles. Solutions often require compromise between competing perspectives. Yet history shows that the nation has repeatedly confronted complex issues and adapted over time. Slavery was abolished after civil war. Voting rights expanded after sustained activism. Economic crises led to reforms. Technological revolutions reshaped industries. The pattern suggests that adaptation is part of the system itself. Looking ahead, uncertainty remains unavoidable. New technologies may disrupt employment structures. Global events may affect trade and security. Climate conditions may require infrastructure adjustments. Political leadership will change through elections, bringing new priorities. However, the underlying framework of governance and civic participation provides stability during transitions. The story of the United States is not defined by perfection or constant harmony. It is defined by endurance, reform, and gradual progress shaped by diverse voices. From the first settlements along the Atlantic coast to modern digital networks connecting millions, the nation has expanded in territory, population, and influence. Its development has been marked by conflict and cooperation, expansion and reflection. And as time moves forward, the next chapter is being written quietly through policy decisions, scientific discoveries, cultural expression, and everyday effort. The future power shift and the next American era. As the nation moves deeper into the 21st century, attention slowly shifts from reflection on past achievements to preparation for future challenges. The United States stands in a position built over centuries of expansion, industrial growth, war, reform, and technological change. But position alone does not guarantee stability. Power in the modern world is no longer measured only by military strength or territory. It includes economic influence, technological leadership, digital infrastructure, education systems, and innovation capacity. The country continues investing heavily in research universities, private sector development, and defense modernization to maintain its global role. Technology remains one of the strongest drivers of change. Artificial intelligence systems are integrated into business operations, transportation networks, healthcare diagnostics, and cybersecurity defense. Automation increases efficiency in manufacturing and logistics. Companies compete to develop advanced computing systems that can process massive amounts of data in seconds. This rapid growth creates opportunity, but also uncertainty. Workers in traditional industries may need retraining. Policymakers discuss how to balance automation with job creation. Educational institutions respond by updating curriculum to include digital skills and technical expertise. Cybersecurity becomes critical infrastructure. Government agencies and corporations face constant digital threats. Protecting financial systems, energy grids, communication networks, and personal data requires advanced defense strategies. Cyber teams operate quietly behind the scenes, monitoring activity and preventing disruption. Unlike physical wars of the past, many modern conflicts occur in digital space. Attacks may target information systems rather than buildings. Defense strategies now include software protection, encryption technology, and rapid response protocols. Energy transition continues shaping long-term planning. The United States remains one of the largest energy producers in the world. Oil and natural gas extraction continue alongside growing investment in renewable sources. Solar power, wind energy, hydroelectric systems, and battery storage technology expand gradually. The shift toward cleaner energy involves economic calculation. Regions dependent on fossil fuel industries adapt through new investment programs and workforce retraining. Policymakers attempt to balance environmental sustainability with economic stability. Global competition also intensifies. Other major economies expand their technological capabilities and manufacturing strength. International trade relationships evolve as supply chains diversify for security and efficiency. Strategic partnerships strengthen cooperation in defense, technology research, and economic development. Diplomacy remains essential. Negotiations address trade disputes, climate agreements, and regional conflicts. Alliances formed decades earlier continue to provide mutual security guarantees. Military presence abroad adapts to shifting geopolitical priorities. Space exploration becomes a key area of competition and collaboration. Private aerospace companies launch reusable rockets to reduce costs. Government space agencies plan permanent lunar research stations. Long-term objectives include scientific exploration, resource research, and preparation for potential human missions to Mars. Space activity reflects broader ambition. Investment in exploration demonstrates technological capability and long-range vision. Domestically, infrastructure modernization remains central. Bridges, highways, water systems, and electrical grids require maintenance and upgrade after decades of use. Federal and state funding supports large-scale construction projects. These improvements aim to increase resilience against natural disasters and population growth. Climate-related planning also influences infrastructure design. Coastal regions reinforce defenses against rising sea levels and stronger storms. Western states develop water management systems to address drought conditions. Urban planners integrate green spaces and flood mitigation into new development projects. Economic transformation continues shaping labor markets. Service industries expand alongside digital platforms. Healthcare demand increases as the population ages. Technology firms recruit skilled engineers and data scientists. Manufacturing integrates robotics and automation into production lines. Entrepreneurship remains strong. Startups form around innovation in clean energy, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and advanced materials. Venture capital funding supports experimentation and risk-taking. Education adapts to these demands. Schools emphasize science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and critical thinking. Community programs promote technical training for careers in skilled trades. Universities conduct research that connects academic theory with practical application. Cultural identity evolves alongside economic change. Media representation becomes more diverse. Artistic expression reflects regional experiences and global influences. Digital platforms allow communities to share stories without traditional gatekeeping. Public debate remains active. Issues such as healthcare affordability, taxation policy, immigration reform, and environmental regulation continue to shape election cycles. Political engagement may fluctuate, but participation remains a defining feature of the system. The legal framework continues to serve as a foundation. Constitutional amendments, court decisions, and legislative actions interpret rights in modern contexts. Institutions operate with procedures designed to balance power and prevent concentration of authority. Despite disagreements, peaceful transfer of power remains a core principle. Elections determine leadership changes through ballots rather than force. Looking forward, the future of the United States depends heavily on adaptation. If innovation remains strong, education improves, infrastructure modernizes, and civic institutions maintain legitimacy, the country can sustain influence on the global stage. If challenges such as polarization, economic inequality, or external competition intensify without constructive solutions, progress may slow. History shows that the nation has repeatedly faced uncertainty and emerged with adjustments rather than collapse. From colonial settlements struggling for survival to an advanced technological society connected globally, the pattern demonstrates resilience. Part 5 highlights the next stage of development, not defined by past wars or past industrial growth, but by digital transformation, global competition, and long-term planning. As modernization continues, one of the strongest forces shaping the future of the United States is data. Information now moves faster than physical goods once did. Governments, companies, and institutions rely on data analysis to make decisions about resource allocation, security planning, healthcare distribution, and economic forecasting. Massive data centers store information for cloud computing services. These facilities require stable electricity, cooling systems, and secure networks. Their growth reflects how digital infrastructure has become as essential as roads and bridges were during the industrial expansion era. The expansion of digital systems also increases responsibility. Privacy protection becomes a central concern for citizens. Laws and regulations attempt to define how personal data can be collected, stored, and used. Technology companies develop stronger encryption methods to protect user information from unauthorized access. Artificial intelligence integration expands beyond basic automation. In manufacturing, machines monitor production lines for defects and inefficiencies. In finance, algorithms detect fraud and analyze market patterns. In healthcare, predictive systems assist doctors in diagnosing diseases based on medical imaging and patient history. However, reliance on automated systems introduces new risks. Errors in programming or biased data inputs can create unintended consequences. Policymakers and engineers work together to establish ethical guidelines for development and deployment. The workforce continues adjusting to technological transformation. Some jobs disappear due to automation, but new roles emerge in programming, system maintenance, digital security, and data management. Career paths increasingly require continuous skill development rather than a single lifelong qualification. Companies invest in employee training programs. Government initiatives encourage vocational education and apprenticeships. This shift reflects recognition that adaptability is critical in a rapidly evolving economy. Manufacturing undergoes reinvention as well. Advanced robotics improve precision and productivity. Additive manufacturing, also known as 3D printing, allows customized production of parts and prototypes. Domestic production gains renewed attention to reduce reliance on complex global supply chains. Supply chain resilience becomes a strategic priority. Recent global disruptions exposed vulnerabilities in international trade networks. Businesses and policymakers analyze transportation routes, supplier concentration, and inventory management systems to prevent future interruptions. Diversification of suppliers and regional production hubs increases stability. Financial systems evolve with digital currency experimentation and online banking expansion. Electronic payments dominate consumer transactions. Digital platforms allow instant money transfers across regions. Discussions about central bank digital currencies emerge as governments explore modernizing monetary systems while maintaining regulatory control. Despite technological growth, social challenges remain significant. Housing affordability pressures urban and suburban areas. Population growth combined with limited land availability increases demand for residential development. Policy discussions explore zoning reform, construction incentives, and affordable housing programs. Healthcare access continues to require balance between cost control and quality improvement. Advances in medical technology extend life expectancy, but also raise expenses. Insurance systems, public programs, and private providers navigate ongoing reform debates. The political environment remains dynamic. Media ecosystems influence public opinion through rapid information sharing. Citizens engage in discussions through digital platforms that amplify voices, but also intensify disagreement. Efforts to promote civil dialogue and factual accuracy become increasingly important. Local governance plays a crucial role in addressing practical concerns. City councils manage infrastructure projects. School boards determine education priorities. State legislatures adapt policies to regional economic conditions. These decentralized systems allow experimentation across jurisdictions. Internationally, strategic competition influences investment in research and defense. The United States continues allocating resources toward advanced military technology, cyber defense, satellite surveillance, and intelligence capabilities. Partnerships with allied nations strengthen collective security frameworks. At the same time, diplomatic engagement addresses global issues such as climate cooperation, humanitarian assistance, and trade regulation. Negotiations require patience and long-term perspective. Cultural innovation remains a powerful soft influence. American entertainment, technology platforms, and educational institutions attract global participation. Cultural exchange flows both ways, enriching domestic society with international perspectives. Youth engagement shapes future priorities. New generations grow up with digital connectivity as a default experience. They participate in online communities, advocate for policy issues, and contribute entrepreneurial ideas. Their expectations often emphasize transparency, sustainability, and technological integration. Leadership transitions continue through elections, reflecting democratic continuity. Campaigns adapt to digital communication tools while still relying on traditional organizing methods. Voter participation fluctuates but remains central to legitimacy. Economic forecasting suggests cycles will persist. Periods of growth will likely alternate with slowdowns. Innovation will create opportunities, but structural adjustments may cause temporary disruption. The resilience of institutions and markets will determine how smoothly transitions occur. Long-term national strength depends on multiple interconnected factors. Education quality that prepares skilled workers. Infrastructure that supports efficient movement and communication. Technological research that maintains competitive advantage. Stable governance that resolves disputes peacefully. Social cohesion that sustains shared civic commitment. These elements do not develop instantly. They require consistent investment and cooperation across political and regional differences. The story of the United States moving forward resembles its past: gradual expansion, reform under pressure, adaptation to new realities, and steady institutional continuity. As the United States moves deeper into the future, attention shifts from short-term policy cycles to long-term positioning. Leaders in government, industry, and research increasingly think in terms of decades rather than election terms. Strategic planning becomes essential in a world where technological change, climate shifts, and global competition evolve continuously. National power in this era depends heavily on innovation ecosystems. Research universities partner with private companies to develop breakthroughs in quantum computing, advanced materials, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. Government funding supports scientific exploration that may not deliver immediate profit, but strengthens future competitiveness. Quantum computing research holds potential to solve complex problems in encryption, logistics optimization, and chemical modeling. Though still developing, it represents a frontier where nations invest heavily to secure leadership. Biotechnology advances expand medical possibilities. Gene editing tools allow scientists to study and potentially treat genetic disorders. Personalized medicine tailors treatments to individual biological profiles. Pharmaceutical research continues addressing chronic diseases and emerging health threats. Ethical oversight becomes critical as technology grows more powerful. Regulatory bodies review scientific progress to ensure safety and responsible application. Defense strategy adapts to emerging risks. Traditional military strength remains important, including naval fleets, air capabilities, and land forces. However, cyber operations, satellite defense, and artificial intelligence integration play an increasing role in national security. Space infrastructure becomes part of defense planning. Satellites provide communication, navigation, intelligence gathering, and climate monitoring. Protecting these assets becomes a priority because disruption could affect both military operations and civilian systems. Economic competitiveness remains tied to global supply chains. Semiconductor manufacturing is a strategic focus because microchips power everything from smartphones to military equipment. Investment in domestic chip production reduces dependence on foreign suppliers and strengthens technological sovereignty. Manufacturing reshoring efforts expand gradually. Companies relocate parts of production closer to domestic markets to improve reliability. Automation supports these efforts by reducing labor cost concerns. Energy independence continues evolving. Oil and gas production remains significant, supporting export capacity and domestic consumption. Simultaneously, renewable energy expansion reduces emissions and diversifies power sources. Nuclear energy discussions reemerge as a potential stable low-carbon option for large-scale electricity generation. Grid modernization improves efficiency and resilience. Smart grid technology allows real-time monitoring of electricity flow and faster response to disruptions. Climate adaptation planning becomes integrated into infrastructure development. Coastal cities invest in flood barriers and drainage upgrades. Wildfire-prone regions improve forest management and emergency response coordination. Federal agencies collaborate with state governments to implement risk reduction strategies. Population aging influences policy design. As life expectancy increases, retirement systems and healthcare programs face long-term funding considerations. Workforce participation adjustments and immigration policy debates intersect with demographic planning. Younger generations gradually assume leadership roles in politics, business, and cultural institutions. Their perspectives shape future policy priorities and technological adoption patterns. Education systems emphasize interdisciplinary learning. Students combine technical expertise with communication skills and ethical reasoning. Employers value adaptability and collaboration across fields. Digital platforms enable remote collaboration with international partners. Global engagement remains central to strategic planning. The United States maintains alliances in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. These partnerships provide collective security and economic cooperation. Joint military exercises, trade agreements, and research collaborations strengthen shared interests. At the same time, emerging powers expand influence through investment and infrastructure development abroad. Competition encourages innovation and diplomatic engagement. Soft power continues playing a significant role. American universities attract international students. Cultural exports influence global entertainment trends. Technological platforms connect users worldwide. These non-military tools contribute to influence and economic strength. Domestic unity remains an ongoing objective. Political debate remains intense during election cycles. However, institutional frameworks ensure disputes are resolved through legal and procedural mechanisms rather than force. Public discourse benefits from civic education that emphasizes constitutional principles and historical awareness. Community resilience strengthens national stability. Local emergency response teams prepare for natural disasters. Volunteer networks support neighbors during crises. Religious and civic organizations provide social support systems that complement government programs. Technological transparency improves access to information about public policy. Open data initiatives allow citizens to review government spending, environmental metrics, and legislative activity. Accountability mechanisms evolve with digital record keeping. Artificial intelligence governance emerges as a policy priority. Regulations attempt to ensure fairness, transparency, and safety in algorithmic systems. Standards are developed to prevent misuse while encouraging innovation. International cooperation seeks common principles for AI development and ethical application. The future trajectory of the United States likely includes cycles of rapid advancement followed by periods of adjustment. Breakthrough innovations may transform industries quickly. Social adaptation may require time and debate. Economic transformation may produce both opportunity and disruption. However, historical patterns show that the country has repeatedly navigated transition periods by combining institutional stability with adaptability. From its origins as a collection of colonies to its position as a technological and economic leader, the defining characteristic has been evolution rather than sudden completion. I'm ready. When looking far ahead, the future of the United States cannot be predicted with certainty. However, patterns from history provide guidance. The country has changed repeatedly through technology shifts, economic transitions, wars, and social reform. The next decades will likely follow a similar pattern of adaptation under new conditions. One major long-term factor is technological integration into everyday life. Artificial intelligence may become deeply embedded in transportation systems, education platforms, healthcare diagnostics, and industrial management. Instead of acting as separate tools, intelligent systems could operate continuously behind the scenes, optimizing energy use, predicting infrastructure maintenance needs, and assisting decision-making at all levels. As automation expands, society may need new frameworks for employment. Some jobs may shift from manual tasks to supervision of automated systems. Others may focus on creativity, strategy, research, and human-centered services. Policy discussions could explore income support structures, workforce retraining initiatives, and economic models that respond to automation-driven productivity growth. Education systems may transform significantly. Personalized digital learning platforms could adjust lessons in real time based on student performance. Virtual reality and simulation tools might allow immersive training in engineering, medicine, and environmental science. Traditional classrooms may remain, but they could integrate advanced digital support. Healthcare could experience profound improvements. Predictive analytics may identify disease risk earlier than ever before. Genomic data combined with AI analysis might enable highly targeted treatments. Remote monitoring devices could detect health changes instantly and alert medical professionals before complications escalate. However, ethical oversight will remain critical. Data protection, consent, and equitable access must be addressed to prevent technological benefits from concentrating only among certain populations. Public debate will shape regulatory frameworks to ensure innovation does not compromise rights or fairness. Infrastructure over the next century may become smarter and more interconnected. Smart cities could coordinate traffic flow, energy consumption, waste management, and emergency response through integrated digital platforms. Sensors embedded in bridges and roads might detect structural stress and schedule maintenance automatically. These systems increase efficiency, but also create dependency on network reliability and cybersecurity protection. Environmental adaptation will likely continue as a defining issue. Sea level rise may require relocation or reinforcement of coastal communities. Water scarcity in certain regions may drive investment in desalination, conservation technology, and efficient irrigation. Climate resilience planning will influence zoning laws, building codes, and transportation development. Energy systems may shift further toward low-emission sources. Advanced battery storage, hydrogen technology, nuclear innovation, and expanded renewable infrastructure could reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Transition speed will depend on technological breakthroughs, market conditions, and policy incentives. Demographic evolution will also influence national identity. Population diversity will continue expanding through immigration and internal migration. Cultural exchange will shape language patterns, business practices, and social traditions. Generational perspectives will evolve as younger citizens bring new priorities to public discourse. Political institutions may adapt gradually to new communication realities. Digital participation tools could allow citizens to engage more directly with local governance. Transparency platforms may provide real-time tracking of legislative progress. However, maintaining accuracy and preventing misinformation will remain important challenges. Internationally, the United States will likely navigate a multipolar world. Power may be distributed among several major economic regions. Cooperation on issues like climate change, cybersecurity standards, and trade stability will require diplomacy and negotiation. Strategic alliances will remain essential for collective security. Military strategy may focus increasingly on deterrence through technological superiority. Advanced defense systems, cyber capabilities, space-based monitoring, and artificial intelligence integration will shape future preparedness. Physical conflict may decrease in frequency, but increase in technological complexity. Economic resilience will depend on diversification. Supporting small businesses, encouraging innovation clusters, strengthening manufacturing capacity, and investing in research will reduce vulnerability to global disruptions. Regional development strategies may address economic inequality between urban and rural areas. Civic engagement will remain central to stability. Participation in elections, local governance, volunteer service, and public dialogue strengthens institutional legitimacy. Education about constitutional principles and historical context supports informed decision-making. The long-term success of the nation will likely rely on balance. Balance between innovation and regulation. Balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. Balance between economic growth and environmental sustainability. Balance between global engagement and domestic stability. History shows that extreme shifts without adjustment often create instability. Gradual correction through democratic processes tends to produce more durable outcomes. Looking 50 or 100 years ahead, the United States may appear technologically different from today. Transportation, communication, and energy systems may operate with far greater automation. Urban design may integrate smart infrastructure. Healthcare and education may function through hybrid digital-physical models. Yet certain foundational features are likely to remain. Constitutional governance, peaceful transfer of power, federal and state cooperation, private enterprise combined with public oversight, cultural diversity within shared institutional structure. These elements have survived wars, economic crises, and social transformation. The future chapter of America will not be written solely by national leaders. It will be shaped by scientists developing new technologies, teachers guiding students, entrepreneurs creating companies, voters participating in elections, and communities responding to local needs. Progress will not eliminate challenges, it will transform them. Extreme long-term horizons and the expanding role of America in a changing civilization. When historians look far into the future, they often step beyond specific policies and instead examine structural forces. Population trends, technological evolution, resource management, scientific discovery, and global stability shape the long arc of development. For the United States, extreme long-term projections involve thinking not just decades ahead, but generations and even centuries forward. One of the most transformative forces over long horizons is technological acceleration. If computing power continues expanding, advanced artificial intelligence systems may become capable of managing large-scale infrastructure networks autonomously. Energy grids, transportation systems, agricultural distribution, and communication networks could operate with minimal human intervention under supervision. Such automation would increase efficiency dramatically. However, it would also require strong governance frameworks to prevent system failures and protect against misuse. In a highly digitized future, cybersecurity may become as critical as physical defense. National security could depend heavily on protecting digital infrastructure from external interference. Quantum-resistant encryption methods might be implemented to secure communication systems. Continuous monitoring systems may detect anomalies in real time and respond instantly to threats. Space expansion may redefine economic potential. Long-term visions include permanent settlements on the Moon or research bases on Mars. These settlements could support scientific experimentation, resource extraction, or even manufacturing in low-gravity environments. Space-based industries might include satellite servicing, asteroid resource exploration, and deep space communication systems. Public and private partnerships would likely drive exploration efforts. Such expansion would require international agreements governing space activity to prevent conflict over resources and territory. Energy transformation over a century may result in a highly diversified system. Advanced nuclear reactors could provide stable, low-carbon electricity. Fusion research, if successful, might unlock nearly unlimited clean energy. Renewable technologies may become highly efficient with improved storage systems. Energy abundance would influence economic growth. Affordable power supports manufacturing, data processing, transportation electrification, and advanced research. Environmental adaptation will remain ongoing. Climate patterns may continue shifting gradually. Coastal cities might invest in advanced flood barriers or redesign waterfront infrastructure. Some regions may require managed relocation strategies if environmental conditions become unsustainable. Urban planning may incorporate climate projections into long-term development decisions. Smart construction materials could respond dynamically to temperature and moisture changes. Demographic transformation will shape governance structures. An aging population may require expanded healthcare services and retirement system adjustments. Immigration policy may influence workforce stability and economic growth. Balancing population sustainability with social integration will remain important. Education in an advanced future may become highly personalized. Students could use adaptive learning systems powered by artificial intelligence that track progress and adjust lessons automatically. Virtual classrooms might connect learners across states and continents. Physical campuses may evolve into research and collaboration hubs rather than solely lecture centers. The economy in a long-term future could rely heavily on knowledge-based industries. Research, design, software engineering, biotechnology, renewable energy development, and advanced manufacturing may dominate productivity growth. Intellectual property protection and innovation incentives will become central economic policies. At the same time, service industries that require human interaction may remain stable because human connection cannot be fully automated. Political systems may experience gradual modernization. Digital tools could allow citizens to review legislation more easily and participate in public consultations. Transparency technologies may increase accountability. However, maintaining data security and preventing manipulation will be critical to preserving trust. Global relationships will continue evolving. Power distribution among major nations may shift depending on economic growth, technological leadership, and resource management. Strategic alliances will adapt to maintain stability. International institutions may reform to reflect new geopolitical realities. Trade networks could become more regionalized or technologically specialized, depending on security considerations and supply chain resilience. Cultural identity in a future America will likely remain pluralistic. The nation's strength, historically, has included the ability to integrate diverse traditions into a broader institutional framework. That pattern may continue as global migration and digital communication deepen cultural exchange. Technological immersion may redefine daily experience. Augmented reality tools might overlay digital information onto physical environments. Communication platforms may integrate immersive visual spaces for collaboration and social interaction. Transportation may become increasingly autonomous and network coordinated. Yet, despite innovation, human values will still guide policy. Questions about fairness, freedom, equality, responsibility, and opportunity will remain central. Technology may change methods, but debates about principles will continue. Long-term stability depends on institutional resilience. Courts, legislative systems, regulatory agencies, and civic organizations must maintain credibility and effectiveness. Transparent governance builds public confidence. Accountability mechanisms ensure power remains distributed rather than concentrated. Economic sustainability also requires fiscal responsibility. Managing public debt, investing in productive infrastructure, and encouraging private sector growth will influence long-term financial health. Policy decisions today shape future flexibility. Looking across centuries, the United States has demonstrated a consistent pattern. Expansion followed by consolidation. Innovation followed by regulation. Conflict followed by reform. Growth followed by adjustment. This cycle does not eliminate challenges. It manages them through adaptation. In the most extreme long-term perspective, the nation's future will depend on how well it integrates technology with human development, maintains social cohesion amid diversity, and balances global leadership with domestic stability. The coming decades and centuries will not be defined by a single event, but by continuous progress shaped by millions of decisions. I'm ready. Speculative breakthroughs and radical transformations of the American structure. When thinking far beyond current trends, it becomes possible to imagine breakthroughs that fundamentally alter economic systems, governance methods, and daily life. These possibilities are not predictions, but scenarios based on technological momentum and scientific research. One potential breakthrough area is advanced artificial general intelligence. If machines eventually reach levels of reasoning comparable to human cognitive flexibility, they could assist in solving extremely complex problems. Government agencies might use such systems for policy modeling. Scientists might use them for accelerating research discovery. Engineers might rely on them for designing infrastructure optimized for efficiency and resilience. However, powerful intelligence systems would require strict oversight. Safeguards would need to prevent misuse, system manipulation, or unintended consequences. Ethical governance frameworks would become central to technological progress. Another speculative transformation involves energy breakthroughs. If controlled nuclear fusion becomes commercially viable, it could provide nearly unlimited clean energy with minimal environmental impact. Such a development would reduce dependence on fossil fuels and reshape global energy markets. Cheap and abundant energy would lower production costs across industries. Manufacturing, desalination, transportation electrification, and data processing would benefit significantly. Regions that previously faced energy scarcity could experience economic expansion. Material science innovations could also redefine infrastructure. Ultra-strong, self-healing construction materials might extend the lifespan of bridges and buildings. Smart materials could detect stress and repair micro cracks automatically. Roads might incorporate embedded sensors that monitor traffic flow and structural integrity. Transportation systems could become fully autonomous and interconnected. Autonomous electric vehicles could communicate with each other, and traffic management systems to reduce congestion and accidents. Public transit might operate on demand rather than fixed schedules. Logistics networks could optimize routes dynamically based on real-time data. If such systems mature, urban design may shift accordingly. Parking demand could decrease if shared autonomous fleets replace private vehicle ownership in some regions. Cities might repurpose parking structures into housing, parks, or commercial spaces. Land use planning would adapt to mobility transformation. Biotechnology breakthroughs could extend human health spans. Regenerative medicine may allow damaged organs or tissues to repair more effectively. Gene therapies could reduce inherited diseases. Advanced diagnostics might detect health conditions at extremely early stages, enabling preventive intervention rather than reactive treatment. These advancements would raise ethical questions about access and affordability. Ensuring equitable distribution of medical innovation would remain a policy priority. Digital identity systems might evolve. Secure digital identification platforms could streamline access to public services, financial systems, and voting mechanisms. Such systems would require strong privacy protections to prevent surveillance abuse. Balancing convenience with civil liberties would be essential. Education could transform into lifelong adaptive learning ecosystems. Instead of finishing education at a specific age, individuals might continuously update skills through digital platforms integrated with employment systems. Professional development could become automated and personalized. Economic models may also evolve. As automation increases productivity, discussions about wealth distribution may intensify. Some policy frameworks might explore universal basic income concepts or alternative compensation systems funded by productivity gains. Others may emphasize job creation through innovation and entrepreneurship. The structure of work itself could change. Remote collaboration might dominate many sectors. Global teams could operate across continents without physical relocation. Work hours may become flexible, measured by output rather than time spent in offices. Governance may incorporate digital participation tools. Citizens might access real-time information about budgets, legislation progress, and public project performance. Feedback mechanisms could allow communities to communicate concerns directly to representatives through structured digital platforms. However, technology cannot eliminate disagreement. Political diversity will continue to shape debates about economic strategy, environmental policy, national security, and social programs. The strength of democratic institutions will depend on their ability to manage disagreement peacefully. International competition could intensify in advanced technologies. Nations investing heavily in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, and space infrastructure may gain strategic advantages. The United States will likely continue prioritizing research investment to maintain leadership. Alliances may evolve around technological cooperation. Shared research projects, data standards, and innovation partnerships could strengthen diplomatic relationships. Economic integration may increasingly depend on technological compatibility. In a radical scenario, space expansion could become economically meaningful. If resource extraction from asteroids or lunar environments becomes feasible, new industries might emerge beyond Earth. Manufacturing in space could support satellite infrastructure or scientific research. Such expansion would mark a historic shift similar to continental expansion centuries earlier. Despite these transformative possibilities, core principles may remain constant. Rule of law, representative governance, market-based economic activity combined with regulation, protection of individual rights, civic participation. These principles provide continuity across technological revolutions. Speculation about the future highlights possibilities, not guarantees. Progress depends on research breakthroughs, policy decisions, global stability, and societal adaptation. I'm ready. The full arc, from fragile colonies to an evolving future. When looking at the complete history of the United States, the most striking pattern is not sudden perfection or permanent stability. It is movement. It is adaptation. It is continuous adjustment to new circumstances while preserving core institutions. The journey began with small colonial settlements along the Atlantic coast. Those communities struggled for survival. They faced harsh winters, limited resources, and uncertainty about governance. Over time, they developed self-rule traditions and local assemblies that planted the seeds for independence. Independence did not arrive peacefully or effortlessly. It required revolution, war, and negotiation. The founding generation created a constitutional framework designed to balance power and protect rights. That structure became the foundation for future growth. Expansion followed. The nation extended westward through purchases, treaties, migration, and conflict. New states joined the Union. Infrastructure connected distant regions. Railroads, canals, and highways tied together a growing territory. Industrialization transformed economic life. Factories replaced small-scale production. Urban centers expanded. Immigration increased cultural diversity and fueled workforce growth. Economic power grew alongside technological progress. The Civil War tested whether the Union could survive internal division. It ended slavery, but left deep social and political consequences. Reconstruction attempted to redefine freedom and citizenship. Although progress faced resistance, constitutional amendments reshaped legal rights. The late 19th and early 20th centuries introduced rapid industrial expansion and global engagement. The United States emerged as an economic powerhouse and later participated in world wars that reshaped international order. After World War II, the country entered a leadership role in global security and economic development. The Cold War defined decades of foreign policy strategy and technological competition. Space exploration, nuclear deterrence, and alliance building marked that era. Civil rights movements expanded democratic participation. Legal reforms strengthened protections against discrimination. Social progress occurred gradually through activism, legislation, and court rulings. The digital revolution transformed communication and productivity. Computers, the internet, and mobile technology reshaped business models and personal interaction. Information moved instantly across continents. In the modern era, challenges became more interconnected. Economic systems depend heavily on technology. Security depends on cyber resilience. Environmental conditions influence infrastructure planning. Global trade links domestic stability to international developments. Yet, despite complexity, certain characteristics remain consistent. Institutional continuity ensures peaceful transfers of power. Courts interpret constitutional principles through changing contexts. Elections provide structured competition for leadership. Federalism allows experimentation at state and local levels. Economic dynamism encourages innovation. Entrepreneurs build companies that redefine industries. Research institutions produce scientific breakthroughs. Private investment supports technological advancement, while public policy guides long-term strategy. Civic participation remains essential. Citizens vote, advocate, volunteer, and debate policy. Public discourse can be intense, but the ability to express disagreement openly reflects democratic foundations. Looking forward, the next chapters of American history will likely center on adaptation to emerging forces. Technological acceleration may reshape labor markets and education systems. Energy transformation may redefine industrial infrastructure. Demographic shifts may influence policy priorities. Global competition may require renewed investment in strategic capabilities. However, transformation does not erase identity. The American system is built on the idea that improvement is possible through reform rather than revolution. It allows correction without destruction. It encourages debate without eliminating continuity. Over centuries, crises have tested the system. Wars, economic depressions, political conflicts, and social movements have all challenged stability. Each time, adjustments occurred through legal processes and institutional mechanisms. That pattern suggests resilience. Resilience does not mean absence of problems. It means capacity to respond. The long arc from small settlements to advanced technological society demonstrates that growth has been gradual yet persistent. Progress often followed hardship. Innovation often followed necessity. As new generations inherit leadership and responsibility, they interpret foundational principles within modern contexts. They apply old documents to new challenges. They preserve core values while updating methods. The future of the United States will not be written in a single moment. It will be shaped by research discoveries, policy reforms, cultural expression, technological breakthroughs, and daily decisions made by millions of people. The story remains open. From colonies to independence, from expansion to industrialization, from global wars to digital transformation, the nation has evolved continuously. And in the decades and centuries ahead, it will likely continue evolving, not in isolation, but within a connected world that demands adaptation. This concludes the full 10-part journey of the quiet rise and slow power of America, from colonies to superpower. If you want next, I can turn all 10 parts into a complete mega, combined master script with smooth transitions, a professional YouTube upload version with timestamps, or an even longer expanded edition that doubles the depth and word count.